Chairman, we're now live. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is the meeting of the Finance and Corporate Services Select Committee. My name is Councillor John Riley and I'm the chairman of this meeting. A key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. For those in the public gallery, you won't be on camera, but there isn't anybody there, so that's all right. A reminder to all councillors and officers and those speaking today that you should turn the microphone button on when speaking, and this will ensure you can be heard in the room by those watching online. So I'm going to ask everybody here to introduce themselves. So going around the table, we'll start with Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Blaine Bridges.
Councillor Kaushik Banerjee.
Councillor Kishan Bhatt.
Susie Horn, Head of HR.
Dan Kennedy, Director of Corporate Services.
Councillor Raju Sansarpuri.
Councillor Narinder Garg.
Councillor Stuart Mates.
Rebecca Reid, Democratic Services Apprentice.
Liz Penny, Democratic Services Officer.
All right, thank you. Housekeeping. Before we get started with the main agenda, some quick housekeeping items. Fire alarm. We do not expect a fire drill, so if the fire alarm does go off, please follow the officers to the fire exit and out the building to the designated meeting point, which is the Civic Centre forecourt. Mobile devices, for those in the room, please make sure they're switched off or on silent before the meeting starts. Please note that some councillors may be using tablets or laptops to view the agendas. Resident feedback forms about the meeting, they're available in the room. There's also a version online under the broadcast. So let's start with the agenda. So apologies for absence, please.
So apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Mand and Councillor Sansapuri is substituting.
Thank you, and you're very welcome to the meeting. Thank you. Declarations of interest in matters coming before the meeting. Anyone got any declarations of interest on the usual ones that we just record? Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. All right, so this is agenda item 3. Very full minutes as ever. We had the sort of last areas of the procurement meeting. On the last occasion, the procurement topic is a very big topic that we selected for very in-depth review, and I think what with one thing and another, we were told on the last occasion that the likelihood was that the finished article will come before us in September, which is perfectly fine. We don't sit in August, I think, so after this meeting, then that will be the first meeting that we have. But a lot of different suggestions were put forward, very useful ones by the members who were present, and we look forward to that piece of work because it really is, I think, going to be quite a big and important review that we will take to Cabinet. With that said, everybody happy with the minutes and can we agree them? All right, thank you very much. Good, they're agreed. So we shall go on. The items of business marked in part 1 are going to be considered in public, and items in part 2, which I don't think we've got any, will be considered in private. Item 5, which is one of our 2 matters to be given information about, by officers who've earlier introduced themselves. So this is digitalisation of the contact centre. So we've got Louise Forster and Dan Kennedy. So we'd be delighted to hear from both of you.
Thank you, Chairman. So Lou and I will provide an update, a bit of a double act this evening. So if I give an overview, an introduction, and then I'll hand over to Lou to fill in the blanks. So as set out in the paper, we've got within our council strategy a commitment to be a digital-enabled, modern, well-run council. And with this in mind, and really since really a couple of years now since we've introduced the My Account for residents, which is really an online account to submit inquiries and receive updates from the council. In other words, making it as convenient and as easy as possible for our residents, particularly those who are on the move, to submit inquiries to the council. We've been actively putting in place new technology to support the residents at the front door, digitally, electronically, and support them to use the My Account, so that we are seeing some strong successes in this area, which I'll ask Lou in a moment to say a bit more about. But the feedback we've been receiving is that it's very much welcome, it's convenient. Just over 40% now on average of all contacts at the front door are being managed or handled using the new technology. And we've got ambitions now with the next phase to take that end to end, and we're focusing on 3 key areas for that next phase, which includes waste, housing, repairs, as well as, what's the third one? I forgot.
Social care.
Social care, that's right. So I'll hand over to Lou now at this point, just to give us a fill in the blanks and talk through in particular what we've been focusing on since November. So there's been quite a rapid rollout of this new technology, and importantly, it's been rolled out to make it as convenient as possible, just to emphasise that. But over to Lou.
Hello, everybody. Oh, sorry. Hello, everybody. So, I've worked in the contact centre since it was born, and during that time, we have gathered a wealth of information that explains to us what our customers, our residents, contact us about via the different methods of contact, whether it's over the phone, whether it's email, whether it's walking in face-to-face or online. And we've used that information to look at how we can create efficiencies and make those services more accessible and more digitally oriented. So we started working with PwC approximately 2 years by sharing that information with them. And when they were looking at that information, they came up with 28 different user stories that they felt could be fully digitalized using the AWS, which is Amazon Web Services. That is basically having voice automation at the front end of all our telephony in the contact center. Now, this is a really ambitious plan, because last year alone we recorded 1,700 different reasons why residents contacted us as a council. So you can imagine the amount of work that needed to sit down with PwC and my agents to go through how we could create these user stories digitally for residents when they contacted us over the telephone. And we wanted to centre the My Account around all of those digitalisations so that residents could access that information 24/7, not just when we were on, in the office there. So of these 28 different user stories, they were centred around all of the services sitting within the contact centre. The contact centre took calls on adult social care, waste, environment, highways, housing needs, as well as homelessness, housing repairs. So approximately we were receiving between 50 and 60,000 calls, or contacts I should say, across the telephone and email per month. And these were not reducing significantly. So consequently we were needing to have more and more staff involved in that management of those calls, and there were no way of at that time of reducing those contacts unless we looked at how we were going to do this digitally. So with the introduction of AWS, we worked alongside PwC, who initially took the lead back in around the July time when we started forming the project team to look at the types of calls across each of the individual service areas. And we picked housing repairs first, because that, given the fact is that we've got 10,000 stock in our borough, gave us the biggest volume of calls. So we looked at exactly what residents were calling us about, using insight to form the plan of how we were going to take this forward. And PwC took the lead, with us heavily involved, obviously, with the scripts that we were building. The contact centre staff, as well as PwC, formed these call scripts as to how we would manage that individual as they came through, using the knowledge and the insight that we had as to the reasons why people were contacting us. And in November, we went live with the first service on AWS. And basically what that did was it would ask somebody why they were contacting the council, and the system was configured to be able to provide them with a response, or to send those individuals a link to the online reporting system that we have on our website. So it's about channel shifting residents where they can to be able to go and report these services 24/7. Now, as part of that, now we understand that obviously not everybody can go online and self-serve. So within that mechanics, what we did was we developed a concept that if a resident was unable to go online, they were still able to be passed through to a contact centre so that they could support and assist that resident by doing it for themselves through the contact centre. And then thereafter, once we had the housing repairs service online, we then very quickly then were able to understand how we could configure those call scripts, and by the end of the second month we had moved the housing tenancy services online, quickly followed with the environment, and then strategically every couple of months then we were able to develop the call scripts, work with the services, demo the process to those service areas, and go live with all of the services that are contacting the contact centre with the direct dial numbers onto the AWS system. And by the 30th of June last month, all the services and all the direct dial numbers which are currently being served into the contact centre are now on the AWS system. To date, as a consequence of that, and work that we've been doing around the My Account since June 21, we've been using My Agents to explain to residents when they're calling about the benefits of being able to go online and access those services 24/7. And to date, we have reduced My Establishment by 17 posts, or 15.63 FTE already.
Just to add sort of one final point, and Lou touched on it, is that throughout this sort of programme, and it's something that will continue, we are providing support to residents to access the technology. So, for example, Lou mentioned that a resident can call us for us to help them set up their My Account and use their My Account. And if it's still an option for a resident to still speak to an agent if they feel they need to. So we're not absolutely, as it were, compelling residents to use just one form of channel, one contact type. The other kind of wider point is that we have been rolling out support to residents to support them and develop their digital skills. So through the adult learning service, they've been running courses around digital technology, and also in our libraries as well. A librarian, library staff offer support to residents using the IT technology available in libraries. So we've had a sort of wraparound support service for residents to adopt and embrace this new approach.
That last point actually is quite interesting, because one of the things that we've all been thinking about is how to better utilise our libraries, and how, I mean, we do know that people still use them and still use them quite a lot, but to have them as points where, or centres where this sort of thing can be learned or helped with, I think it's very good. It's very, very good, and will bring people back into the libraries. And then there's other stuff that libraries can help with. So it's kind of a self-generating thing. Thank you for all of that. What I'm very interested in is really sort of how residents have. You say it's been successful, and I'm sure you're right, but how people have kind of taken to it. I mean, it is new and it is quite challenging, and you do, one hears as a councillor, you do hear sort of concerns around the nature of contact with the council, and stories about sort of people giving up because things have taken a long time, or they don't understand it, or whatever. I mean, yes, of course, part of it is familiarity and frequency. I mean, we found that with the new system of putting in members' inquiries and so forth, and service requests. It takes a little while to get used to it all. But what are the sort of main problems that you've come across, and the main issues that you've come across, and how are you managing to deal with those?
Actually, now we're live with all the services, and sort of the experience that we've had in implementing this. This is now a period of reflection, review, to understand our customer, our resident behaviour. One of the things that we found is that this type of technology is in a lot of public companies, and if you've used it previously, or you have maybe a concern when you're connected to AWS, we found that some residents remain silent. They don't say anything. Now, where someone remains silent, or the system doesn't understand what they're saying, because we give them a sense of prompts about what that service, so for example, if someone was ringing through for a housing repair, we say, do you have an emergency? So if it's an emergency and we ask them to confirm that it's an emergency, they are automatically passed through to a resident. If they have an email address and they have access to the internet, then we say that if it's a normal routine inquiry or report, then they can go online and do it, and then obviously the accessibility is 24/7. So what we've been doing is looking at how we can improve it. So one of the things is we've been looking at what people do when they remain silent. And now we're developing the technology to be able to manage that silence by saying, we're going to, give you the list of the different types of inquiries so that you can say what it is that you need, rather than, just the remaining silent and it goes into like an error queue. The other scenario that we've got is for those residents who we think might struggle. We're having it's a vulnerable list, but an assisted list where staff can refer their resident or their tenant or their caseworker or their caseload into the contact centre, so that we can add that individual's phone number onto the AWS system. So when that person then contacts us and connects to the system, it will automatically recognise that it needs to do something different and pass that individual through to an officer directly. We're also looking at the phrases and the words that people say. An example where we're looking at what happens on the housing waiting list. So the system that residents are used to using is called Locator. And when they call through, they ask about, the locator LIN number, because they want to do a choice-based letting bid on one of the properties that we have. But the system we see doesn't recognise the word locator. It thinks that it's saying, look to her. So we're now changing some of the wording that we have on the AWS system to reflect what people are actually saying now they're coming through.
On those many contacts that you talked about before, are not a lot of them similar? So you'd have a lot of people will have the same issue to contact the council about. So is there either a literal or a verbal kind of drop-down list? So it might be about boilers, it might be about kitchens, it might be about... So it's likely, isn't it, that there will be multiple requests in relation to the same thing. And is that able to be identified? Because some of it won't be emergency, clearly, and some of it will be update requests and all the rest of it. Is there a way of being able to identify and channel similar requests?
So I mentioned earlier about a call script. So the way it works is it's like a flow chart. So using repairs again, because repairs can be quite complicated. So right at the beginning, we say that you're through to the repair service. You know, what is your emergency? And then the system will pass that individual, that caller, through to a member of staff. We then ask, and they'll say, no, it's not an emergency. Then we say, you know, have you got a day-to-day routine inquiry? They say yes. Then we ask them what it is, and then we send them the appropriate link for them to go and do it online. We ask them, do they want the link, and then we send it to them. We ask them if the issue is to do with their heating or their hot water. If they say yes in that case, we then ask them what their postcode is, and depending on the postcode they give them, the system then will send that caller through to the right company, because we have two gas companies that we deal with. Depending on their postcode, so we use two areas. So based on that postcode that they provide, they will be automatically then transferred to the heating company to go out and repair their system.
And this fits in with the procurement review we were doing, because if we had procured, let's say, I don't know, a glazier or something like that, and the problem was one of my windows is broken or something similar, I don't know, the front door's not working or the lock or something like that. And if the council had procured and had a framework with regard to different companies that provide certain trade services, does the request would it then go straight through to that company who are on standby, as it were, or could be, to do that service?
So within the housing repair service, they have direct labour who go out and do the various trade functions. We also have support contractors, and they may provide us with a roofing or jet washing or something specific to those inquiries, so those go directly to those. And then we have specialist service contractors such as lifts or door entry systems. Now at the moment with those types of service contracts, it goes into the housing planners team in the back office for those to allocate to those service contractors. But we have got plans, and we're in the discovery phase of building a function for the support contractors and the service contractors to also use the same system as our direct labour. So once that's implemented, what you just described is what is going to happen. Yes.
Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Chairman. A very informative report. Thank you for that. And it is indeed an exciting time in Hillingdon as we transform in this digital age. But with digital transformation is not just opportunities but also threats, and in particular issues such as cyber attacks. Indeed, the NHS was a particular victim in recent years. So my question on that basis would be, what is our business continuity plan in the event that we fell victim to a cyber attack, or indeed if the servers went down? Do we have backups in place? Is it just a case of flicking a switch, we go back to the phones? I just want some reassurance that whilst we make this transformation, we have backup in place to protect residents.
So part of my business continuity for the contact centre is our contracted out-of-hours service, which is Anchor. So they provide our care line and our emergency out-of-hours service. And in past, when we've had issues, from a technical or a web functions, where the system's gone down, we are able to transfer the calls over to Anchor. They take the calls when we close. So in effect, between ourselves and Anchor, we provide a 24-hour solution.
All right, thank you. Councillor Garg.
Yeah, just a question. When you say you may get silent pauses, is there anything that the system does for people that may be have some sort of disability? They might be blind, hard of hearing. English may not be their first language. What are we doing to accommodate for that sort of thing?
Those very examples you just described is why we're doing this assisted service. And the system currently will pass a resident through to the contact centre if it doesn't understand what that individual has said on that call. So we've got that as a backup. But one of the things that I wanted to put in place from an inclusivity perspective was the ability for social workers, for the housing tenancy officers to be able to refer an individual into the AWS concept, and then we can add that individual's phone number into the AWS, so as soon as it connects, we can then pass those callers into the contact center into a human voice.
Sorry, so do we have someone that, if someone doesn't have English as their first language, would we have someone in the contact centre that they can speak to in whatever language they need to?
We don't. We have a translation service, so invariably, in all the time that I've worked in the contact centre, what we find is that if someone doesn't have English as a first language, they normally will use a loved one or a neighbour to help them on the telephone. I have also we're exploring with AWS about the possibilities of translations, but obviously that comes at a cost. But again, it's just something that we are exploring, we are actively asking about.
Sorry.
Well, I'll just picking up on that. What did people do before this who were in that position? So if English wasn't their first language, how were they contacting the council anyway?
So they would ring us, but normally someone would ring on their behalf to be able to, whatever the issue is.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to endorse this very forward-thinking approach, because I think it's definitely AI and automation is being used. I use it in my own business, and I know AWS does a great job. It's quite scary how real the response is, and the fact that we've saved £600,000 is quite remarkable. I've got a two-part question. The first is whether or not we can convert the AWS web service into sort of an app-based model, whereby, as an alternative perhaps to voice automation, whether or not we can sort of consider chatbot features within the My Account itself, and that can perhaps use AI-based responses, and that also could particularly help people that may not be able to hear due to a disability. The second question is, moving to AWS sometimes can result in vendor lock-in, where the dependency on AWS makes it difficult for us to switch to alternative platforms in the future, kind of limits flexibility and poses challenges on pricing structures. And sometimes AWS, because of the evolution of AI, it could become more and more expensive, especially when we're kind of using it for other services. And I'm wondering if you had a plan in place for the long term for that.
As part of the voice-based automation, we also have the chatbot. So that chatbot can either be someone who is sitting on the page asking a question and be able to get the same responses and answers based on the voice. We also have a live chatbot. If and when people need it, if they need help or support on the website, they can also come through to us in a live environment. That was part of your question. I'm trying to.
And AI.
Oh yeah, AI. So we're looking at AI, and as you're saying, that is a technology that is developing rapidly, and we are certainly engaging with AWS to see sort of what the roadmap is and what other features and functions are available and how we could use it across the entire website. And one of the elements that we're also concentrating on with AWS is about moving people to the website, so going online first is the first priority rather than ringing the contact, because obviously every call costs. So what we really want to do with the whole channel shift is to get residents to go to online first and foremost, to gather the information to report their services before the telephone, and then the telephone would be then obviously to centre on our assisted for our residents who need that additional support.
Just to endorse that point, we are keeping a very active and open mind about providers because it is such a fast-moving technology area, and that point's absolutely right. We don't want to be locked in with a dependency just on one provider with one technology type. We just need to be very open and very agile.
All right, good. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested to understand the customer experience of this. I understand there's behavioural changes that need to be set, and it's a mixture between art and science in that, I suggest. But it would be useful to have the information in this report or subsequently on how much abandoned calls there have been with the introduction of this. So. And what the waiting times, the impact on the waiting times. So I think one of maybe the frustrations I hear the most from people that need to use the telephone service because they can't access online might be literacy reasons, for example. And there are certain demographic groups, not just those who struggle with English as a first language, but also additional language, but those who have poor literacy online is not an option. So if they have to get across, when there is a huge front door with the AWS system, which helps the majority, that minority spends longer on the phone to get through that sort of portion. So I guess it would be useful to have some information after this meeting, or not immediately after, but in good time, around how much longer people have had to wait, or if actually they haven't had to wait longer because there are more agents, just that kind of analysis on that basis, and what the number of abandoned or redial causes. That I often find with these journeys that sometimes, and I don't know if this is the council system or not, I can't remember having too many different systems, particularly public service ones, you get to the end point and there's a cut-off when you get the information message. I don't experience that to my knowledge as much with the council, which is a great point, but I can imagine that when people start hearing that message again, that they may give up. And I don't know how you would resolve that, but it would be useful to get a sense of what more can be done within the technology and the experience, so that people, varying the call music might be great, but generally it's that what normal traditional public service methods in kind of feedback. And I am surprised with the council system that there isn't a kind of, would you like a survey at the end? I guess there's a cost implication to that, but everybody else that you ring, press 1 or 2, even HMRC would like your opinion on their interesting system. So it would be useful to get a sense of are there other ways to get more feedback, particularly from groups that rely on phone only.
So every telephone contact via AWS is answered immediately because of the ability of that system. And we are able to see how many people, when they're connected to AWS, how many are sent a text, how many are sent the forms, because the the resident is asked, do you want us to send you the link to the online reporting form, so we're able to view how many people have connected to AWS and have asked for the required piece of link or information available. Interestingly, the calls have reduced because people are now obviously self-serving. They're asking for that form. They don't need to wait on the phone to be answered by us. The call wait to be answered by a member of the contact centre has reduced. So the actual call wait time to be answered has reduced to just about the 4-minute mark. So that's a big improvement on what this time last year when we were, in the contact centre, because of the very volume of calls that we were receiving. So from that perspective, the services are far more accessible, and one of the things that we really need to be encouraging our residents who are comfortable going online and self-serving is to leave the telephony and the ability to go through to the contact centre for those who need the support. One of the things we've been doing when residents do come through, say for example they've said nothing or they said the wrong thing, we do sit there and we do say to them, let us walk you through it. Or we do say, look, you can go online, have you got an email, are you comfortable, do you access the internet? So we're having a real meaningful conversation with these residents. Not everybody wants to go online, granted, but when we show them how easy it is, they say, oh, I'm going to do that myself. Now you've shown me, I'm going to go away and I'm going to try this and I'm going to do this for myself. So we have seen some really positive conversations with residents, in the contact centre, speaking to these residents, where they said, you know what, I'm going to try this. And age has not been a barrier to those conversations and for those people trying to do it online, I have to say, in our experience.
All right, Councillor Garg, I think perhaps you want to... Is that okay? All right. Councillor Banerjee.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to echo the sentiments of my fellow councillors this evening and say this is quite an interesting report, and I also like the sort of forward-thinking nature of it. I've got a multi-part question, and the first part of my question is, has the system been stress tested? And what I mean by that is, say for example, I don't know, particularly bad weather, either snow or it's windy, and everyone logs into the system. In my sort of day-to-day work, I won't mention the name of the company, St Patrick's Day wasn't something they stress tested for. So when everyone logged into the website, it crashed over, fell over. So in sort of maybe Christmas, New Year's, when it's cold, windy, people need gritting and they're wanting information. If a lot of people log in at the same time, can it deal with that volume? And second part of my question is, this is a moving sort of world. Forms change, processes change. I really like how you outlined it's a process flow. How flexible and how quickly can we update information that this service provides, so we're not giving the wrong information to people because something changed overnight? Thank you.
So the stress test, we had the perfect storm when we went live with housing repairs. It was back in November, and we had all those floods and those high winds, and we went live that week. So we did the stress testing before we actually went live. And then we had a very live scenario to show that actually that stress testing worked. So it was a perfect storm, but to answer your direct question, the entire contact centre dialed the phone number for housing repairs, which is the first service we went live simultaneously in the contact centre, and at that time there was 60, 70 of us all ringing that number from a variety of either mobile phones or landlines. So the stress test was the first thing that we did before we went live. The second part of your question was?
Agile, we can change forms.
So during the transition of PwC working alongside us to that skill set being transferred into the contact centre. So a team in the contact centre now are responsible for building all the call scripts, making the changes, building the forms, adding them to the website. So we are, as an authority, safe and sound because we're not reliant on a third party to come in and make any of those changes and obviously apply any costs. And the staff within in my team They can make all the changes that are required, and all the links that are then sent subsequently are all part of that function that we provide within the contact centre. Working alongside us in the contact centre also enables us to change messages on the fly. So we have a function within the system which is, we call it a dynamic message. So if there's a road that's the bins, for example, haven't been able to get down because of either a blockage or something's gone wrong with a truck, we are able to add these dynamic messages as and when they are required. So we've built that functionality in.
I suppose it's a bit like if you have a problem with your Wi-Fi or something, and you ring whoever it is that you're with, and they say, well, if you're in this area, there's a common problem, don't worry about it, we're on it, or something along those lines. So it's that kind of advanced information that would be useful for some people, wouldn't it? Because if they're all ringing in about something which you know about and is being dealt with, then you don't need to have a conversation. All right, Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm interested in the Council's strategy around supporting those to access things digitally, which is a big part of the drive of this. Is kind of the other hand of the pair that's needed. We know that libraries' hours are reducing. They're particularly reducing in evenings and lunch times. There's a cost of living pressure at the moment where working families are struggling with things like data. So they've got the hardware, but they can't have the access and stuff. So these are very kind of the right now sort of problems that are coming in. And I'm just wondering what kind of contingencies or other plans are being put into place. I mean, this will be a shorter term issue because I suspect that there'll always be a proportion of the population that will need more support digitally, but as generations go through, we'll be more and more reliant on who knows what technology, because I don't guess if I invent it, I'll be very rich. However, in terms of the current financial pressures on people, and also the options that make it less accessible in certain areas because of the library changes, what contingencies are in place, or what extra resources available to make sure that we're not leaving people in the digital cold, as it were.
I mean, I think what's important is that we're outreaching to a whole range of different community groups. So we have officers who are in regular contact with community leaders, faith leaders, and importantly providing a whole network of different opportunities. And as I touched on earlier, I think we can probably separate out aspects like skills and confidence, and running workshop sessions, adult learning, running programs to support less confident residents to use the technology. Certainly with I guess cost of living pressures and access to internet, we work very closely with schools for families to provide support, and I know a number of the schools actually provide some of the kit and the infrastructure that's needed to support children and families, and also just generally speaking through community groups, the support that's provided as well. But you're right, we do need to keep a watchful eye on that and make sure that we're not leaving some residents behind, whether it be due to skills and confidence or also access directly to the technology and web forms.
All right, well, I'm very conscious of the time and the fact we've got another big topic to cover as well. So unless anybody's got any further questions, and we'll come back to this without any questions.
Just one final point, if I
may.
So this all can sometimes seem very abstract. So we'd very much welcome maybe yourself, Chairman, and or representatives from the committee to come down to the contact centre, sort of see it live in action one day at your convenience, and just sort of perhaps do your own stress test on Lou. And no, but seriously, I think it is quite. Otherwise, it's just it's a report with some numbers in it. And I think it's quite helpful to see how residents are using the technology.
No, I think that's a very good idea, as long as you don't expect me to have a go and sort of try and solve problems on the phone. Although I probably could. All right, yes, no, that's great. And as I say, I'm very grateful to Louise for explaining it all. And I mean, it is such a fast-moving environment. But if we get this really bang on right, it'll be a much better way, a more effective way for our residents to contact the council. And once they, again, it's going to take time for them to get used to it. We also, and I don't want a response to this, just a thought that ever greater engagement and education and using the libraries particularly. Because I know we talk about those who don't have access, but if we've got libraries full of computers that people can use, encouraging maybe those groups who might otherwise have been deemed to be those who would struggle with this sort of thing, to go along to the libraries, to use those facilities, to have people there who can help them. I think, I really do think that kind of element of public education, especially in relation to this sort of thing, and also they may end up asking lots of other questions about usage and so forth. So I think we need to look at that a bit more, maybe to have a continuous program, maybe, or an ongoing program of public education and sort of advertising, workshops and all the rest of it in the library. Because we do have a lot of computers in our libraries, and I know a lot of people do use them, but at the same time it may be that if we sort of focus on those groups who are deemed to be those who have difficulty, then that would be useful. But look, that's really good. Thank you so much indeed for coming along and telling us all about the digitalisation of the contact centre. Good. All right, we can move on to agenda item 6, which is a similar topic, but in relation to HR services. And we have Susie Horn here, who's going to tell us all about that. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much for having me tonight. So probably the first piece to cover off is just around some of the background of where HR are now at the moment. First and foremost, there was a restructure of HR in 2022. Part of this, which is really key to our strategy, is around creating dedicated recruitment teams and a separate HR business partner and advisory team. This means that we have teams that are subject matter experts within these areas, and before they had been combined. As has already been said around the digitisation, and we very much want to be digital by default, looking at our systems. This is absolutely key for us, and currently we have a number of systems that operate within HR that don't interface with each other. This means that we have a significant amount of double entering and system maintenance, and that's not before we look at the impact in terms of our employees and looking at being that employer of choice. So one of the main things that we have happening over the summer is our L&D system, our learning and development system, is going through an upgrade, so that will interface with our people system, which means there will be no system maintenance needed for that. We are also looking at our talent acquisition system, applicant tracking system, because our current one, again, it doesn't interface with our HR system, so the system that the potential employees apply on is different to the system that we use. So again, it's a disjointed process for those candidates, and it's also difficult for our team as well. So we will be looking at that over the course of the year to get a system that does interface. And finally, our HR system, which is ResourceLink, we want to optimise that to its full potential. We use a small proportion of it at the moment, and if we can optimise that, that can make things more efficient for our team and make for a better employee and candidate experience. So looking at a few of the departments in isolation as well, so recruitment is absolutely critical to us at the moment. It's not just about us filling posts. We need to make sure that we have the right skills at the right time. We need to raise our employer brand and also make sure that we, as the London Borough of Hillingdon, are the council of choice that people want to work at. Our HR operations are our front door to HR. They do the processing of the work, and they get a number of queries from our employees every day. At the moment, we're looking at about each person across the council raising about 7 queries to HR a year. So that's quite a large number of queries that we get. It totals at about 19,000 a year. We need to understand what those queries are and why they're coming through to us. They can be anything from, can you change my annual leave, please, when we have a system that does that, through to anything from a payroll query to a grievance. So we do need to make sure that we're looking at that, because if we can free up that team, they can do value-add services through the rest of the council. And lastly, an underpinning feature for us that needs to happen is our equality, diversity and inclusion strategy. Our aim is to have, we should be having a workforce that is reflective of our borough, but it's also really key for our recruitment market as well. Again, it's about differentiating ourselves, creating that competitive edge and creating a culture where people feel that they belong, and also feel heard. This will also help us to become that employer of choice. What's also key is there is a shift that's happening around funding applications and assessment frameworks, and ED&I is very much being asked for within that environment as well.
All right, thank you. I think one of the looking at the fact that the operating model was restructured last year, I mean, there's obviously still a great deal of work to do, and the kind of main question, and it may very well be that this is one of our next projects, looking at HR in the great deal of detail. Is do you think it's fit for purpose as it stands? And to an extent, it probably isn't, because it's still being rejigged and looked at, and the fact that different bits don't talk to each other and different things don't. So, you know, starting from that sort of viewpoint, and very often with these things, it's far better to have fewer things to change than trying to change absolutely everything all at once, and to have some core parts of the service that really do need absolutely sort of digging in, turning over, and all the other gardening metaphors I can think of. So what are the main problems do you see, and what are the main issues around fitness for purpose and getting it into a much better state? Can I just say, Louise, if you don't want to be sitting around for this, it's fine. You don't have to feel that you do, but that's fine. Okay.
So my belief is that the structure is now the right structure for us to go forward. We are on a journey, but the journey is not as simple as HR being fit for purpose, because HR can be fit for purpose, but we've got a cultural change with our employees that we need to take them on, and our managers, and about how they interact with HR, how they use HR, and kind of everything associated with that. So very much our structure is work in progress, and we're on a journey. There will be tweaks that will happen to it, but the fundamentals are there, and actually when you look at research, you look at other organisations, they will operate on a structure that is reasonably similar to ours, which is a sort of centre of expertise. But as I say, the main piece is around taking our employees and our managers on a journey that actually how you interact with HR is very different. As a manager, if you're doing a sickness meeting or you're doing a potential disciplinary meeting, you won't have HR sat there next to you. That's not what HR are there to do. We will provide the advice and the guidance to you, but we don't need to be sat there in the meeting with you. If you want to book your annual leave and change your annual leave, you can do that all in the system. It's all very much self-serve, and we can utilise that a lot more than we currently are. We've recently we had 800 employees who were still getting paper pay slips, and we have taken that down through some fantastic work down to 30 people is where we're at now, and they are people who don't have access to an email, which is what you need. So there is very much a journey to take managers on, take employees on, for us to be able to be getting to a place where HR is really operating at its full capacity. There is still lots to do around that culture change, around living our values, and lots of sort of training and changing how we do that, moving with the times, about how we develop managers, engage with employees. So my short answer is yes, HR is fit for purpose, but we are on a journey culturally because we can't do it. HR is not an isolated area. We're on a journey.
So what's the plan to get managers and senior managers utilising HR better and knowing what success means in terms of what... I mean, sometimes I think they don't know what they want. You grin there, and I think in agreement. They kind of know what they want in a sense, but they don't know maybe how to express it, or need help with the kind of direction of travel as how to get there. And sometimes it's a bit difficult, so it kind of goes to the back burner a bit. But how does that journey get speed it up and be more effective?
So I was grinning because I have had that discussion with a director recently about the challenge that sometimes is needed from HR to directors and to the business is sometimes they don't realise they need that, but we as HR do know that they need that. So in terms of how we're engaging with managers, we're doing it in a variety of different ways. It is coming from the top with CMT, and in terms of engaging with the team there, it's then filtered down through the business partners and the areas that they engage with as well. So that message will be going out through SMTs. We then are changing how we deliberately engage with managers as well. So when we're looking at doing sort of updates to policies, or we're doing training sessions, we're utilising things like let's do short webinars, let's do videos that people can watch. So we're already starting to change those things, and it's also making sure that the HR team feel confident that they can turn around to the manager and say, no, we're going to do it this way. We're not going to sit there next to you in a sickness meeting, because that's not the greatest use of our time. Here is the resources that you need to do that. Hold the meeting, take an adjournment if you need to, and call me, and we can support you through that process. We have some great new HR business partners and advisors who've joined us only as recently as April, and they are already starting to make that change. The other aspect for HR that's really key for us is looking at lean and operational excellence. So we're embracing that and looking at all our processes to make sure that they are as optimised as they possibly can be, and reduce any waste as well.
I suppose that sometimes very senior managers and others have a kind of idea about what HR is all about, but need to know some more, or at least be maybe even, I know it sounds a bit crazy, but trained in what HR really is, because they may have had a view of HR for a very long time about what it is, and you know, HR's moved on, as it were, in terms of what it can do and what it can provide, and maybe that view is still kind of embedded. So a bit of two-way traffic is needed. Is that sort of something that you find?
Yes. So my background is not public sector. So this is my first job in a council as well. There is very different sort of expectations in the private sector to the public sector. We are probably quite dated in how we still manage things, in the fact that HR is expected to be there. So it's having those conversations with directors, but actually it's very much pushing on an open door here. Everybody wants to improve how we do things, and understands the need to improve, and appreciate a commercial, dynamic, forward-thinking HR advice and service.
All right, thank you. Councillor Gargan.
Just looking at the turnover figures, a question I have is, in terms of reducing turnover, I think you've got 0 to 2 years, and etc. What are you doing about finding out why people are leaving? Is there feedback? Is there exit interviews? Are there programs in place to keep people here, employee referral schemes, etc.? So what are you doing to try and, from a HR perspective, to keep people here and to retain them? And if they're not staying, are you looking at why?
So first and foremost, I don't actually think our attrition is that awful at 14%. I'm reasonably comfortable with that, and it's important that actually if we had really low attrition, that can be as worrying as having really high attrition. So the overall number is not something that I'm overly concerned about, and when we benchmark against other public sectors, they hit about 12%. But I'm with you that the two areas that I look at is kind of that 1 to 2 years and that 2 to 5 years, because they are spiking slightly higher than the rest of the time. We are implementing an exit interview, so that hasn't been happening. So an exit questionnaire is a better description. We are implementing that because that has been previously happened and it's stopped. So we've revamped it and we're re-releasing that. So we are starting to get that feedback. One of the other things that is quite well thought of is actually doing stay interviews. Why do people stay? Why are people staying? So that's something else that we want to look at introducing as well, so we can really understand where it is. We're also doing an employee engagement survey as well this year, which will hopefully give us some of that feedback as well. It is something that we do need to work on in terms of collecting that information as to why people stay and to why people go at this stage. It's still very much sort of in its infancy in terms of how we're redefining it. In terms of, refer a friend programs, we do have that as well.
All right, thank you. Councillor Batt.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Susie, for your report. I agree with you that in a corporate world, HR is changing a lot culturally, and also processes and procedures are changing. And we're moving away from sort of being reactive to more proactive. So to give you an example, rather than disciplining or imposing performance improvement plans, we're now kind of taking the more conciliatory approach, and the more, So I'm just wondering how the system helps with that, because one thing that I wanted to kind of explore was how you sort of touch on employee incentives and how you kind of help resolve the disputes internally, how you help resolve that through workplace mediation or conciliation, and how the system you've got with the digitisation, how that can help support that.
So, so in terms of where you have issues within the workplace, one of the key things is obviously to try and solve it at the lowest level possible, so in any informal way that we can. We do have a sort of cohort of workplace trained mediators, which is actually something that I haven't necessarily experienced in the private sector, so it's great to be able to have that. And in fact, we have had, in my time that I've been here, we have had the mediators go out and actually had a really positive experience, and the people who experienced the mediation came back and said, this is really helpful for us. In terms of the digitisation of our systems, there probably is going to be little impact in terms of being able to use mediation. That is much more of a cultural piece, and actually our HR business partners, our line managers, knowing that that's there and being able to engage with it rather than it being part of a system. We do advertise it, so it's through our intranet, and any time that you have a workplace grievance or an issue, one of the things we would offer up automatically would be the mediation, because the success rate from that is really, really high.
All right, thank you. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. There's two areas that kind of come to mind with this, and I think it is very helpful to have a kind of change and shift of that kind of enabling of managers and raising the kind of standards there. So I think the first one for me is around recruitment. You've got a new training suite or an upgrade of a training suite. How much in there is that of kind of raising the bar and I suppose expectation set on recruitment and ensuring that we're recruiting the right people for the right jobs, and when we're desperate in some sections of the council, which we will be because of the the way that labour markets kind of work, how we're not just grasping the first person but making sure that we're getting that ability to go, we won't recruit right now, we'll wait for another, whatever it might be, another round or another person. So I guess how much of that training suite embedding this idea that recruitment is the greatest kind of enforcement of quality, because you start at that level. My second one is data. We've got a lot of data analysis and lots of development projects around this, and how the kind of cycle of annual leave and the hours people work, people's morale, their health and sickness kind of records, the support they get, detailed down to like sections or teams, and how that information that's collected can be intelligently used to use the kind of approach that Councillor Batt was talking about, that kind of proactive as opposed to reactive, to ensure that the good recruits that we have and those that have remained are supported to flourish at work and to get back to work quickly, or whatever it might be, to rest when they're overworked.
Thank you. So taking the first part of the question, recruitment is a challenge for us. We are operating in a candidates market and we don't have enough skills to go round, and that's very evident in certain areas, specifically social work, planning, with our trades as well. So part of what we need to do around that is actually change how we look to recruit. Recruitment here has been quite an administrative function, and we're probably on the cusp. We are still quite admin heavy rather than actually going out and searching for that talent acquisition piece, and that's what we're trying to move to. So we're actually proactively going out using things like LinkedIn to sort of almost tap people on the shoulder and go, would you like to come and work for us? You then have a great employer brand, and people go, actually, do you know what, yeah, I want to go and work at Hillingdon. So that's one part that we really need to go to. And I think in terms of managers, there is still very much any person in a job is better than no person. And there's still very much a need to kind of actually really challenge that, because when you get the wrong person in the role, the amount of management time that can sap can actually be really detrimental. So there is still very much a learning process for managers and encouraging them to hold their nerve. But we do regularly have times where managers are going, actually, do you know what, none of these people are good enough. So you're then kind of back to the drawing board to go, actually, how do we need to change the advert? Do we need to change the job description? Can we change what the job looks like to be able to attract better people as well? So that's in terms of the recruitment. In terms of the analysis piece, our data is needs work on where it currently is. Compared to a lot of other businesses, we are quite far behind in terms of getting that proactive data. We have quite good turnover data and understanding our demographic of our workforce. But in terms of getting that analysis around sort of annual leave, around support, around sickness, pulling all of that together into one suite that our business partners and our managers can see, we're not in a place where we have that yet. That is something that we do need to do, because, as you said, we can then proactively use that information. And it is about collecting information more than just on those things. It's, we're implementing talent and succession planning as well. So it's overlaying all of this information together to be able to present to managers so we can make informed decisions about workforce as well. Being honest, we aren't there yet. That is very much a journey that we're on, and we're at the beginning of that journey.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and I do think that you can tell that there's support to support everyone who works here as much as possible, as well as get the talent that we need in Hillingdon. I guess my to add to your thoughts and development is how we get that consistency as well between permanent posts and the temporary and casual workers that we directly employ. Obviously, there's other mechanisms for those that are indirectly employed, and how you can have the same standard as far as possible to say, no, we'll hold off and not entrench in some bad practice. But I'm also interested in again the kind of incentive for those workers as well. So there's a kind of equity across the workforce, that people, even in the temporary roles, want to stay or want to return at the right season, etc. So I just wondered how, I'm not best practice in HR in anywhere, but how that might be working out elsewhere, and what kind of learning there is around temporary and casual staff.
Yeah. So in terms of temporary and casual staff, and I think this probably goes across all staff actually, it's around the flexibility. So temporary and casual staff, a lot of the time they are in that position because that works for them. But actually we had a really great example talking to some suppliers recently, and specifically around social workers, that actually we might be, someone might be a temporary or casual social worker because they want to go off and spend 3 months abroad every year because they're at a stage in their life where they're able to do that. Rather than actually them feeling that we can't support them, actually let's look at flexible contracts and go, do you know what, we could actually put you on effectively a 9-month contract, but you're paid consistently throughout the year. So it's about using those different ideas to make sure that you can sit down and have discussions with people. And I think one of the most important things that we need to do is engage with our employees and having a conversation. What is it that motivates them to be here? Sometimes it will be, do you know what, you're 10 minutes down the road from me, I need the money, you pay me, I don't mind the job, I do that, and that's fine. But actually, if we sit down and understand what's motivating our employees, what's going on with their home life, then potentially we can shift things we can't always, that will make them want to stay here more. That can also mean that, actually, do you know what, if we know that someone's going abroad for 3 months a year, we have that planned in the diary, we know when that is, and then we can adjust our staffing levels around it. So there's a lot of just open, honest conversations that we need to have with our employees, and we shouldn't be scared of having those conversations and looking at doing things differently to be able to support them in that.
It's quite interesting that this sector of local authorities, it's not unknown for people to move around, and in fact it's sometimes quite encouraged, because people may start off in a district council and go to a county council and go to a unitary authority, then come to a London Borough or whatever. And you do know, we are aware that there is a bit like, in a sense, not quite so much, but a bit like the civil service, where people move around, get different experiences, and maybe come back. And somewhere like Hillingdon is we like to think, a really good place, because geographically it's a great place, and there's lots of different mixes. But I suppose, in a sense, longevity in the job is a good thing in one way and isn't in another. So dealing with employees who want to be around for a bit, but at the same time might benefit from going somewhere else and then coming back, or that kind of conversation, as you say. But equally, is there a kind of scope for homegrown talent? So you've got going out into the market to find great talent to bring in, so they know what they're doing, they're going to hit the ground running, and you don't have to really worry too much. And then you've got the potential of growing people within the authority, so maybe they go to different departments, see what they like, see what they're good at, and then settle at something. And at the same time, and I guess this comes into the fitness for purpose thing as well, not just for HR, but in terms of the workforce. So managers and senior managers, rather than, if this is what they are thinking, at least we've got somebody, or at least we've got a complement of people. As you say, the extended management to try and look after somebody who really isn't the right fit is not a good use of time. So how do all those different things get dealt with, do you think?
So probably starting at the beginning around part of our strategy and our talent strategy is looking at what talent do we grow, and I'm really excited to see Rebecca here, who's one of our apprentices, and we have a strong apprenticeship programme. We also have a great new member of the team, Thomas, who is our early careers officer. So he is working with colleges around T-levels. He looks after our apprenticeship programme. We are looking at doing a graduate programme, and we're looking at internships as well. So we're really investing in that sort of early careers space and looking at the talent we can grow. And we have some fantastic stories that we don't shout about enough, about people who started off as apprenticeships and have grown into managers and heads of service, but we just don't shout about it, and we need to sell that story, because that is really inspirational to potential candidates and to other employees as well. So there is very much, we need to look at what do we grow, what do we buy, and what do we kind of hire in terms of our talent. And our talent strategy is very much based around that. But unfortunately, sometimes with our grow, when we haven't got the ability to sort of buy in talent at times, sometimes our grow, you need a longer lead time to get people at the level that you need to. So we need to be thinking for our sort of social workers or our planners, or even our finance people, we need to be thinking sort of in 2 to 3 years' time. So again, there's a change there. For managers, in terms of managing employees who are not performing, again, it's giving managers that confidence to have that conversation, that awkward and that difficult conversation. Quite a lot of the time, managers don't feel comfortable doing that, and it's hard. It is hard. Someone who you've hired, who you work with potentially across a desk from, and you're actually having that discussion that says you're not performing, your behaviour isn't there. That is a hard conversation to have. And it's giving managers the confidence and the skills to be able to do that. And getting over the fact, you know what, that will be hard, that will be uncomfortable, but you need to do that in order to get to where you want to be.
All right, thank you very much. And as you say, I know people are often very reluctant to shout out about good stuff because when something bad happens, you know, everyone points at that and says that. But I think you're right, because what you said earlier on something about raising the Hillingdon brand. Well, if people know there's good stuff happening, it attracts people, and if people know that there are success stories, it attracts people, and I think we should be doing that. And however it's done in the sort of corporate side of things, or in the HR, generally speaking, or in, I don't know, even sort of in-house magazines all over the blooming shop, really shouting out about success. We're not brilliant at it because we're a bit timid in terms of doing that, and it's across the board. I mean, we know that, we've looked at it in other areas, but to the extent that you get the opportunity to do that, you really, really should. Well, look, we're going to come back to this as a really big review topic anyway, so this is a very good introduction, and we'll plot some other issues and have a good old deep dive into HR and what it means and the various tentacles and all and those sorts of things. But for now, thank you very much. That was really, really, really very helpful, both of you. Thank you, and Dan as well. Thank you. All right, members, we're now at item 7, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. Anything exciting to say about that?
Nothing really to say, Chairman, unless any of the members here have got any questions or comments.
I think we note it and we've read it, and no doubt we'll come back to it. All right, thank you. And finally, the work programme. Anything further on that? As we said, and we've talked about this before, I think it would be a good topic to pick up on in a much bigger way, HR. I think there's loads involved. I think Susie seems to be a really good person on top of things, but there's a lot to be done. The kind of rejigging and reformation from last year, there's still clearly quite a lot to do, and there's so many different avenues that we can look at and explore that I do think we should adopt that as probably our next big topic. Everybody happy with that?
If I may, Chair, I'm not sure. I think they probably need a little bit more time to implement some of the culture changes that they would want. So a big topic in the future, but I'm not sure about the next one if we finish in the autumn. I get the impression that there's a lot to chew and they're making really good progress. So I wouldn't want to prematurely add more to that when they're kind of on that journey. But absolutely, it's about timing, not the when as opposed to the what. Yeah.
I was just thinking that because there is so much to do and there is a lot to consider, that it might be a better idea to do it now in order to help to sort of support what's being done and get a really good grip of it, because very often when things have been done, going back over what's happened and how they've got there and why becomes quite problematic in terms of explanation. So it just struck me that it was and that there's another aspect to this as well, which is home working and how we're managing that and how we're managing different approaches to working, which we could bring within that as well. But my main concern is to really keep an eye on what's happening and have that opportunity to hear from Susie and maybe some directors as well, because she's talking about issues that are different to the way we're doing things or have been doing things. So I think to that extent it would be something to, and it may be that what we do is to do a certain piece of work on it, and then say, well, okay, how long is it going to take, or for how? Because people, when she talks about going on a journey, maybe I should have asked her, one of the things is, well, how long is the journey going to take? And is there what does success look like, and what's the journey's end? Are we going to Liverpool, or are we going to Carlisle, or whatever? In terms of length of time and extent. So I think we can talk about this maybe offline. But I'm really quite keen on the idea of having a look at it now, in order to give some support, maybe get a good idea about what is happening, and to understand the steer from those who are going to have to use it. So we'll have a think about that. All right, and I'm, as I say, I'm quite keen on this, on the idea of the nature of work and how that's been happening. I mean, we had the sort of great effect on working through the pandemic and afterwards, and just to kind of see where we are with that, and where we are with the sort of structure and nature of work as well, because up until recently it's still been quite a situation where you're talking to people online, or you're talking to people on Teams and so forth, and maybe they're working from home and all the rest of it. So I just want to see where, I think it would be an idea for us to see where that direction of travel, are we going to a more in-office based, or a mixture, or that sort of thing, and to see how effective that is as well. So I think, because, again, it's all to do with service and delivery. So how has the past couple of years, in terms of home working, and maybe a kind of drift to continual home working, or maybe a mixture? I don't really know. That's the answer. It would be quite good for us to find out what the reality was of the nature of work practices. So I think that's something that we can have a look at as well. So, but any other ideas for the work programme? Very grateful from anybody, and we can look at it. Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to highlight again Dan Kennedy's invitation to the contact centre. It's not uncommon for other committees to actually add site visits to the work programme, and I just feel it'd be beneficial to add that to this work programme so that it doesn't fall off the radar, and it's something we can aim to go and do.
That's a really good point. Councillor Mathers.
I absolutely agree with that one. I suppose what's just dawned on me, so Councillor Batt made a very good point about the dependency we may find ourselves in with evolving technologies, as it were, particularly where there are more dominant companies. And whether it be a part one or a part two, because I don't want to specifically name any companies, but whether it would be worth talking with senior officers around what protections they're starting to build into our procurement processes now. I know we've just done a big review, and what are the potential threats of the dominance of certain technologies that we're going to become reliant on in terms of contingency planning. And that's just ideas. I suspect there's more experience in the room, if I'm honest, but it just dawned on me just how much of in 3, 5, 10 years time we could find ourselves really undone if we didn't have some forward-thinking contingency planning, which may already be there, but yeah, a conversation for the committee with respective officers might be quite a useful one to scrutinise in a friendly way.
Well, there's a very similar example in the recent past in relation to another big area where concerns very much were around, and I think I phrased it in terms of not being Betamax man, which some of you will be unfamiliar with because you're too young. But when you look at various technologies and various advances, and a particular one looks like the Nirvana, but in fact 5-10 years down the line you're stuck because that thing isn't the thing that everybody else goes for, or isn't the thing that's the one that fits. And being able to, it's difficult to predict, of course, because you just don't know. You are where you are now. But I think there are aspects around that kind of scenario which, whether we've got the skill within the council, or whether you have to buy that in, or at least have a bit of assistance about that kind of thing. So that kind of future-proofing against locking yourself into a particular company who appear to be very attractive and maybe very good, but the problem is that isn't going to be the most beneficial given the speed of stuff even 3 years down the line. So, but yeah, that's not a bad point at all. All right, well, we'll put that on. But what I'll do is I'll ask Liz if she can spin around all of us for some dates to come back to her pretty quickly so that we can go and have a visit to the contact centre. Is that all right?
Yes, Chairman, that's absolutely fine. I can do that. Thank you.
And we won't need a coach or anything. I'll just walk to somewhere, I expect. All right. Unless there's anything else from anybody, I'm happy to close the meeting.